You're sitting somewhere, maybe late at night. Maybe the news is on. Maybe a word keeps appearing on the screen. War. And there's a feeling that comes with it. Not fear exactly. Not anger exactly. Something quieter than both. Something that sits in the chest and doesn't move. It's the feeling of reading the fourth article about the same conflict and understanding it less than you did after the first one. The feeling of nodding along to someone's explanation, following every sentence, and then 2 minutes later, not being able to repeat a single word of it. And then there's the waiting. Not waiting for the war to end. Waiting for the sentence that finally makes it make sense. The one that lands. The one that stays. That sentence never comes. And at some point, you stop expecting it to. You've read 3 different explanations. You now know less, and somehow that made it worse. Here's something worth knowing. That feeling, the confusion, the waiting, the sense that no one told you the real thing. Between 55 and 65% of people feel exactly this way right now. You're not missing something everyone else found. You're not paying less attention than you should be. The feeling is real, and it is much wider than you think. So here's a question worth sitting with. What if this feeling isn't the result of bad communication? What if it isn't a failure, yours or anyone else's? What if it's something else entirely? No one is going to give you the explanation you're waiting for. And that has never been an accident. So let's start with the feeling. Where does it actually come from? Right now, in 2026, most Americans watching the conflict in Iran don't say they simply disagree with it. What they say is that they can't tell what the goals are. Not that they oppose the goals, that the goals keep changing. The confusion isn't about whether, it's about what. That's a specific kind of confusion, and it feels familiar. Because in 2003, before the invasion of Iraq, 57% of Americans believed that Saddam Hussein had personally helped plan the September 11 attacks. That connection was never real. It was implied repeatedly until it felt true. By 2004, 67% said the war had been based on incorrect assumptions. By 2006, the majority called it a mistake. The same arc, a different decade. Vietnam took longer. Support started high. In 1965, only 24% called sending troops a mistake. Then the Tet Offensive. Then the draft. Then the pictures. The number climbed for years. By 2000, 69% of Americans called Vietnam a mistake. By the time 69% agreed, it had been over for 27 years. Then Korea. Most people today remember Vietnam before they remember Korea, which is itself worth noticing. On June 27, 1950, President Truman committed United States forces to the Korean Peninsula. He did not call it a war. He called it a police action, specifically, deliberately, to avoid the formal approval from Congress that a war would legally require. 5.7 million military personnel, 36,000 American deaths. Not a war, a police action. The wording did a lot of work that day. 4 conflicts, 4 eras. Different presidents, different parties, different enemies, different continents. And the only consistent pattern in war polling is that everyone agrees it was a mistake. Later. The same feeling. A different decade. a different war.
This is not a failure of modern media. It is not a Democrat problem or a Republican problem. Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Iran. Different parties, different enemies, different eras. The pattern doesn't follow the party. It doesn't follow the enemy. It doesn't follow the era. The pattern doesn't move. Every generation gets a war they can't fully explain. That has never been an accident.
Which means the sense of waiting, for the sentence that never comes, for the explanation that never quite lands, it isn't new. It isn't yours alone, and it isn't a mistake in the system. So then, if this pattern holds across every administration, every decade, every enemy, what produces it? So why, if this pattern keeps repeating across different wars, different decades, different parties, there must be something that stays constant while everything else changes, something built into the system itself. Let's start with the person at the podium. Not a villain, not someone who decided to confuse people on purpose. Something more interesting. A person doing a calculation about risk. Because here's what happens when a leader commits to clear goals. If you say, "This war ends when we achieve X," then everyone can see exactly when you failed. People who oppose the war have a specific target to organize around. Your own military has a definition of success they'll be held to, whether things go well or not. Clear goals are accountability. And in the middle of a war, accountability is the one thing a leader cannot afford to give away.
Here's who understood this from the inside. A general who led the last major war most people felt they understood gave his final speech as president in January 1961. He didn't warn about a foreign enemy. He warned about something growing at home. A permanent military structure combined with a large arms industry, new in American experience, creating incentives that democratic systems weren't designed to resist. President Dwight D. Eisenhower called it the military-industrial complex. From inside it. A political scientist named James Fearon proved the same logic formally in 1995. Governments hold private knowledge about what they're actually capable of and what they're actually willing to accept. And they have strong reasons to hide that knowledge, even from their own people. Because once you reveal your real limits, those limits can be used against you. Honest communication in a system built on negotiating power is a liability. It has been in print for 30 years, and yet here we are. Other researchers extended this further. The pattern they found: leaders only seek formal approval from their own lawmakers when they want those lawmakers to share the blame if things go wrong. Smaller wars, or wars they're less certain about, are handled alone. It turns out honesty has a price. The price is negotiation power. Clarity is structurally costly for decision makers. And the costs aren't just political. Brown University spent years tracking the full financial price of the post-9/11 wars. Not just the yearly defense numbers, but veteran care, borrowed money, the long chain of consequences that never appeared in the original estimates. Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria. $8 trillion. The number is so large the human brain doesn't process it as a number at all. Which, as it turns out, is part of how it was possible. The fog is not a bug. For the people inside the system making these decisions, the fog is the feature. But there's a second layer, because this isn't just about what leaders do. It's about what we do. In 1922, a journalist sat with a question that bothered him deeply. Citizens in a democracy are supposed to make informed decisions,
But most of what they need to decide about, wars, crises, events on the other side of the world, they cannot directly see. Everything they know because someone told them.
He called this the pictures in our heads. The world outside is one thing. The version that lives in your mind, built from what the news showed you, what you were told to care about, is another. And whoever shapes those pictures controls what feels real. His name was Walter Lippmann. In a democracy, that kind of control is a very large amount of power. This is where threat response comes in. Your threat detection system was designed for lions. It was not designed for press conferences.
Something over there is a threat. We need to move now!
When that part of us activates, it does not ask for evidence. It wants a clear enemy, a clear danger, and a clear reason to act. It wants the picture to be simple, and the system knows exactly how to provide one. He wrote this in 1922. We have not updated the system. But Lippmann's argument stops at the edge of something. He explains how citizens are misled. He doesn't explain what happens when the people doing the misleading believe it themselves. Which is where a woman reading government documents in 1971 found something nobody expected to find. She had spent months with the Pentagon Papers, 47 volumes of secret Vietnam War records, now made public. She expected to find cold, deliberate lying. Instead, what she found was stranger. The decision-makers had not started by lying to the public. They had started by lying to themselves. They had built a version of the situation inside their own institutions that let them believe what they needed to believe. The hopeful projections replaced the troubling evidence. The image of success replaced the signs of failure. Not because anyone ordered this, because the system made that version feel like the only reasonable one. And then they communicated that version outward. Self-deception came first, and public deception followed. Because the system doesn't need people who plan to lie. It needs people who have already convinced themselves. Years later, a Senate committee released its own findings on Iraq. 17 members, across party lines, unanimous on the core conclusion. The stated reasons for war were unsupported, contradicted, or simply absent from the actual evidence. The analysts had not been forced to reach wrong conclusions. They had stopped questioning what the system had already decided was true. Different war, same structure. Her name was Hannah Arendt, and after reading what the decision-makers had written to each other across years of a war they privately suspected could not be won, she arrived at a phrase that has been misunderstood ever since. She called it the banality of evil. Not that evil is ordinary. Not that ordinary people are evil. That ordinary systems produce outcomes only evil was supposed to reach. But here's what that actually means in practice for real people. And I want to stop here for a second, because something about this argument bothers me. Some wars have had genuine justifications. Some threats are real. The ambiguity sometimes comes from genuine uncertainty, not from manipulation. That is true. So then, why does the confusion feel the same?
in every era, even when the people involved were genuinely trying to do the right thing. That's the part that kept me up. Because if it were just bad actors, you could remove them. The system would stop. But the data doesn't show the system stopping. It shows the system continuing. Different people, different decades. Which means the system doesn't need bad actors. It just needs people doing their jobs. In the 1960s, a psychologist at Yale ran one of the most replicated studies in behavioral science. Participants were told they were part of a learning experiment. Every wrong answer required a shock. The voltage increased with each mistake. The person in the next room cried out, then went silent. The shocks were not real. The person was an actor. 65% went all the way to the maximum voltage. Not because they wanted to hurt anyone, because the role made it feel procedurally correct. He called this the agentic state, the moment you stop being a moral agent and become part of the process. I was told this was the correct procedure. I followed the correct procedure. A psychologist from Yale spent years proving what most of us quietly already knew, and spent years hoping wasn't true. Then, another researcher went further. He didn't even use orders. He assigned students randomly, guards and prisoners. Within days, the guards became cruel. Nobody told them to. The role did. The most useful framework came from a third researcher. He was asking a quieter question. How do decent people end up inside genuinely harmful institutions and still feel, at the end of the day, like they acted reasonably? He mapped it out. Moral justification. The cause is greater than the cost. Euphemistic labeling. Surgical strikes instead of what strikes actually are. Displacement of responsibility. The general made the call, not me. Diffusion. When everyone is responsible, no one really feels it. What's remarkable about that list isn't that it exists. It's that every item sounds like something you've heard in a meeting. Many inhumanities, he wrote, operate through a supportive network of otherwise considerate people. None of them chose this. The system did not need them to. And once you see that, the question changes. It's not who made this decision. It's not who do we blame. It's what does a system look like that keeps producing this with different people in different centuries with the same result? And here is the part that stopped me. Around 500 BCE, a military strategist in ancient China wrote a short book, not about battles, about what war is. His first principle? All warfare is based on deception. Not as a tactic, as a basic claim about what war is. The best war, he said, is already won before the fighting begins. He wrote this 2,500 years ago as military strategy. It also describes a press briefing. In 416 BCE, Athens, a democracy, voted to send an expedition against the island of Melos. The stated reasons? Strategic necessity, regional security. A historian documented the real driver: structural fear, a rising power that could not afford to appear weak. Athens was a democracy. Their citizens voted for this. If you find that uncomfortable, that is the point. A scholar at Harvard studied what happens when a rising power meets an established one. He counted 16 cases in the past 500 years. He named the pattern after Thucydides. Both sides feel the pressure. Both manage their public. The stated reasons sound specific to this moment, this threat, this leader, this region. The stated reasons are different every time. The structural dynamic is the same. 12 ended in war. The other 4 are the ones we teach in school as examples of wisdom. They are not the cause. They are the language the cause speaks. Sun Tzu saw it from the strategist's angle, Thucydides from the historian's, Arendt from inside the documents, Phiron in a mathematical model, Milgram in a lab, a general in ancient China, a historian in ancient Athens, a philosopher reading classified files in 1971, a game theorist at Stanford, a psychologist in a Yale basement. They were not writing about each other. Different worlds, different centuries.
And they all arrived at the same place. Wars are made possible not by uniquely evil people, but by systems that make ambiguous, costly decisions feel reasonable to everyone inside them.
The leader manages risk. The soldier follows procedure. The citizen trusts the framing. The media reports the briefing. Each one reasonable. Each one doing what their position requires. The system produces the outcome without anyone choosing it. Which means, and this is what stopped me, the question is not how do we find the people responsible. The question is, what does it feel like to be inside a system like this? And have you felt it before? Not in a war, in a smaller room.
The fog is still there. Same room, same television, same quiet that comes after too much explanation and not enough understanding. But something is different. The fog looks the same. The figure looking at it looks at it differently. Arendt wrote about this near the end of her life. Not the mechanisms, not the systems, just this, that lying, real lying, requires cutting yourself off from what you actually see. And the way back, she believed, begins with one thing: seeing again. I don't know if I understand it, but I think I'm starting to see it. There was a man who commanded wars he didn't choose, who inherited an empire he didn't ask for, who sat at the center of the most powerful system in the ancient world and wrote private notes to himself. Not strategy, not policy. Notes to stay honest about what was actually in front of him. He wrote them because every system that powerful is designed to make what's happening feel inevitable, feel reasonable, feel like the only possible thing. The question he kept coming back to, in the margins of his own thinking, wasn't, what do I do? It was, what am I actually seeing? I've been waiting for someone to explain it. Maybe that was never the point. Every war asks the same question of the people watching it. Not who was right, not who won, but what kind of system makes this feel inevitable to everyone inside it? He spent 20 years trying to see clearly from inside a system that required him not to. He didn't always succeed. But he kept asking. And once you can see a system, not just in wars, but in the smaller rooms you move through every day, something shifts. Not what you do, how you see.